afternoon, and welcome to Relationship Building and Storytelling as the Keys to C-Suite Success, a Health System CIO Media Inc. production. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box. We'll take those later in the program. Nice way to view the screen. Click on the top center, get it in side-by-side mode. Then you can adjust the divider to get the video boxes and the slides the size you want them. And it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to have our main panel discussion featuring Chuck Christian, VP of Technology and CTO with Franciscan Health, Cletis Earle, SVP and CIO at Penn State Health, and Tanya Townsend, System SVP and CIO at LCMC Health. And then we will have our audience Q&A. So a lot of good stuff to talk about in this webinar, and we're going to jump right in. So Chuck, can we start with you? Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. Thanks very much, Anthony. And it's great to be with my colleagues that I've known for a long time. I'm the Vice President of Technology and CTO. What I typically tell folks, if it's broken, it probably is my fault. I own all the infrastructure and the service desk, and we're a 13 hospital system with hospitals that go south of Indianapolis all the way to Chicago. We have about 400 other locations, physician practices, imaging centers, lab draw centers, and urgent cares, those type of things. And I have the pleasure of connecting all of those as well. So small organization. We've got about 29 to 31,000 people, depending upon how you want to count it. So, and we are a Catholic Big C organization. So,
all right, very good, Chuck. Thank you, Cletis.
Hello, everybody. Cletis Earle, Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer for Penn State Health and the College of Medicine. I too want to thank you for inviting me here to be part of this panel. For the most part, Anthony, this is a very interesting dynamic because you have two previous chairs of CHIME and now the current chair of CHIME. It's Tanya. It's actually amazing. And again, Tanya, so much respect and credit for where she is and, giving her that support. I, from my perspective, again, in charge of all things, are responsible for the health system and the College of Medicine. We are advanced research R1 facility. As you can imagine, we have approximately 8 or 9, depending how you look at the joint ventures facilities that we operate in central Pennsylvania. So in charge of all things, whether it's research, health sciences, humanities, as well as the typical Penn State Health, health system elements. So very interesting dynamic and element, and looking forward to a great conversation today.
Very good, Cletis. Thank you. Tanya?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anthony. And thank you for the shout out, Cletis. Thank you for teaching me everything you know as the former CHIME chair. So it's great to be here. A little bit about my organization. LCMC Health stands for Louisiana Children's Hospital Healthcare System. So we don't go by that name, that full name. It's LCMC Health. We were founded by Louisiana's only freestanding children's hospital, which is Children's Hospital of New Orleans. We've grown into a healthcare delivery system across New Orleans and the Gulf South. We are 6 hospitals today. Children's, of course, remaining our founding member, but we range from pediatrics all the way to level 1 trauma center with University Medical Center and kind of everything in between. We are an academic teaching organization with LSU and Tulane as our primary partners, teaching the next generation of clinicians and physicians. We are 12,000 employees and about 2,000 beds. And it's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So I've been here now as the first CIO of the organization for 7 years. So it's been a lot of tackling technology challenges as we bring this organization together into some standards and a central IT model. So looking forward to the discussion today.
All right, Tanya, thank you very much. All right, Chuck, we're going to start with you. Why is relationship building a key executive skill, and when and how did you first realize this would be important in your career?
Well, thanks, Anthony, for shoving the first question to me. So, the thing about it is that when you get into the realm of leadership, and everything I'm going to say is my humble opinion. So, is that when you're managing groups of people, and so I'll tell you a story about my first advent of leadership, and actually it was in supervision. I'm a radiology tech. That was my first 14 years of my career, and so I was gifted to become a supervisor in that department. And the people I supervised were the ladies who taught me my first vocation. So I learned very quickly that, I was raised in the South, and I don't know if you've ever managed strong Southern women that were professionals, but it can be a challenge. Tanya's smiling. She's down in New Orleans, so she understands. And so you have to understand that, getting the work done is through other people. You're not actually doing it. And I learned a long time ago that it was easier to lead by example and create great relationships with folks because the great leaders that I've had an opportunity to work with, I do my best because I don't want to disappoint them. I want to be successful because I'm doing their work that the organizations need to be done. And so learning those skills of relationship building, in any CIO who has ever implemented for the first time either an EMR or physician order management, understand that building those relationships and key relationships is important. And if we have an opportunity, I'll tell you about what I learned about implementing and upgrading and changing EMRs and physician practices and the relationships that are required to do that. So,
All right, very good. Lots to talk about there. Cletis.
This is in my opinion, the central point of the success or lack thereof of success for a CIO is the component of relationship building. I've learned early in my career that it was absolutely essential to know and connect with physicians and executives and leaders and being able to understand, but not just those folks. It is essential to have executive skills and relationship building with everyone in the organization, rounding and being able to hear not only your nurses, not only your doctors, but also your environmental service people, your people that are actually, when you have your ear to the ground and building relationship with them, they will tell you the real deal. They'll tell you the real story. And it is only at that point that you're able to help. Unfortunately, there's two schools of thought, particularly in technology. And there's one school that I'm smart, I'm the smartest person in the room, right? That you hear that a lot with technology, and if you've ever, purchased a computer and called the help desk, you've experienced that, right? That you're not the smartest person. And then there's the other dynamic, which is we are here to serve. And once you have that mindset in play that you're here to serve, and it's serve anybody for who we are actually supposed to take care of. It's building those relationships, not just at the executive level, but at the, what I call it, at the street level, right? At the area where the people are actually having the most concerns, because those people will then complain to their supervisors, which will complain up, and it will always get there. So I really encourage everybody that, as you journey through your career and continue to navigate, do not take for granted what relationship building is. It is absolutely essential to how you operate.
Very good, Tanya.
Yeah, great answers from my colleagues here. So I'll try not to be too repetitive, but I would say, I call this the get out of IT. So even though we're responsible for IT, I call it getting out of IT and understanding the business that you're in. We definitely are here to serve, and there's very little that we can do as an IT department that doesn't require buy-in, support. Very little that we do kind of behind the scenes that we can say is our success, but in order to really tell our story and make sure that we're serving the organization, we need that relationship to set goals, create objectives, how do we partner on measuring results? So I definitely learned that early on too, really understanding what's important to my peers in the organization, to the success of the organization, and then aligning our IT initiatives to support that and having those relationships to partner through that. I also would put a plug in, not just within our organizations, building those relationships, but outside the walls of your organization. So as we're three Chime members here and former chairs and current chair, those relationships really are important to build with your vendor partners, with peers in the organization, additional thought leaders, because that's going to help you continue to grow in your career. So I would also encourage thinking about where those relationships are.
Very good, Chuck. You mentioned something about physician practices. You were going to tell us a little story. We got to hear that.
Sure. When I was down in Georgia as the senior vice president CIO of St. Francis health system, I was gifted with we were building a women's hospital and a cardiac hospital on our campus, and we were acquiring OBGYN practices at a breakneck pace, and I was integrating a practice a month into it, and the team struggled. And so I finally got out of my office, as like Tanya said, get out of IT, and started rounding in those practices. I also went down and had breakfast and lunch every day in the physician's lounge. The hospital provided those meal services, and the senior executives were able to go down, because then you actually got to interact with the physicians, not in a workplace, but over a meal. And there was a lot of other activities that we were involved in the community that we did together. But what I learned was, it's, in the physician practices, one would think is you need to make sure that, you have conversation with the physician. Well, I will promise you that it is not, the physician's not the primary person. It is his nurse. And then after that, it's the practice manager, then the physician. Because you make those first two people happy, the physician's going to be happy, because you remove the friction out of her life. Because if the nurse is having a bad day, the physician's going to have a bad day. And I found that when I would do my rounding to the practices, and when the office manager saw me come in the back door, that she went and told the lead physician in that practice is I was in the building. Now, sometimes I didn't get to see them, but the next day or so, they would catch me in the lounge and tell me how much they appreciated my presence. Because when the rest of the team saw me, the senior vice president, walk in the back door to make sure and ask them, how's things going? Are we doing okay? What else can we do better? Then it, just the presence was far more important than anything could I say or do, because I wasn't able to do anything other than show up. Because then I would learn and then, give that direction and information to the team. And we were very, very successful in getting those. Because I actually had one physician who told me to my face, that he loved his current EMR and he hated the other one. A year later, he was the champion for that EMR, because we spent the time, letting him design it the way that it flowed for him. He was he'd been in practice in Columbus for 30 years. He's still there delivering babies. And so it's all about how you go about being, as Cletis said, you need to be the servant. If you think you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong damn room. Get out and, you need to make sure that you're not, because you're not going to learn if you are the smartest person in the room.
Very good. All right, next question. Cletis, let's start with you. As an IT executive, how do you identify the key individuals you should build relationships with, other than your direct reports and the person you report to? Is this pretty simple, or can it be a little more difficult? Does it depend on what your priorities or projects are at any one time? Or is there a general overview a CIO should have in a health system about the key individuals that they need to be on a first name basis with? I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, I look at this, and again, this is another scenario. I put it in two camps, right? I see as a, somewhat recent CIO to Penn State, one of the areas you do is you look for opportunities outside of IT, and you also look for opportunities inside IT, exactly to what you just defined. And I can speak of my my inside IT scenario first. I actually had one today. I established what we call Coffee with Cletis, right? Which
I
is
love it.
yeah, I've been doing it for years, but here, unfortunately, with COVID, we've turned to a virtual scenario. But I have a situation where I do a virtual forum with a small group of individuals, and we really just get to know each other, right? To get to understand each other and other dynamics and other elements. And it's interesting as you do that. You share digital coffee, right? You're doing it over online, but you get to understand the people, who we are. Almost what Chuck said, exactly what the food situation is. So many great things can be happening over food, and whether it's coffee. And the key here is getting to understand them and seeing exactly who are the individuals, what are the intentions. Sometimes there's aspirations and other types of areas that you could also, you're in the back of your mind, okay, when something comes up down the road, hey, I know X who's able to potentially, who will be willing to do something like that. And I've created, some of these scenarios, whether it's, putting in a comprehensive internship program by tapping into those resources that you go over, on a day-to-day basis as I do those sessions. And it's great. And guess what? You get to know your team, right? I have a pretty large team, and and it's not easy, so I do the typical town halls and everything that you would see, but this is by far, one of the most successful things that I think is pivotal. And exactly what Chuck said, going to, whether it's the medical staff meetings or, just going to other sites, your hospitals, while you're rounding, being able to identify those key people. I also have a story, just really quickly, very similar to Chuck, where at one of my facilities, years ago, we had a physician that was probably, let's just say, not a happy camper ever with everything. He was just known for not being a happy camper. And I personally took that as a challenge when we were rolling out an EMR. And I wanted to, my whole thing is, rather than push that person aside, I wanted to bring that person in. And being able to engage with this individual, I made this person the face of the EMR, of the physician practice of the EMR, making sure that he was the voice, the champion, and hearing his concerns, and knowing that he was a high influencer to the rest of his colleagues, which some senior physicians are, as we all know. I knew that if I can convince that person, then others, the 80-20 rule, others would come in. And I remember one day where I knew I hit the mark, is when the CEO at the time where I was, he said to me, he said, "Hey, Cletis, what did you do to Dr. X?" "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" It was the first time he ever saw that doctor smile. And that was he realized that making him a proponent, a face or an image, was extremely transformational. And those are some of the things that you need to do, is tapping into not only your internal but external partners in order to be successful.
Cletis, do you recall so this person had a sort of a negative reputation. When you initiated the relationship, was he instantly not the person that you had been told he was, or did he take time? Was he that person?
Well, yeah,
and
he
you
was
were
that
just
person.
So he was. So he
He was-
initially he showed no interest in wanting to be friends with you.
Oh, he hated me. He hated me. He hated me.
So this is really important.
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
how you sort of converted him, so to speak.
With time, patience, and listening. Chuck, as you say, right? You just one mouth, two ears. That philosophy. You listen, right? And as painful as you are, as CIOs, if you're not used to being in pain and hearing the criticisms, then you're in the wrong job. But listen and chip at those problems, right? figure out how you could do it. Bring in the customer, bring in the EMR, bring in the people. You know, if you need to give them a couple of bones, give them a couple of bones. But that's how you go about chipping away at it. Now, he still disliked the organization, right? There was times he still complained about the organization because he was one of those docs. But the point was, he still, when it came to the EMR, he became my champion. And I was more than, honored that we were able to change the dial there. Now, it doesn't always happen, but that was an example where it did happen successfully.
Well, Tanya, this is an interesting point I want to continue with. So, we said you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You also have to, it sounds like, and we've heard this forever, you have to, I guess, not have any ego. You have to be able to stand there and be yelled at and be treated inappropriately, perhaps. And I don't mean inappropriately in a crazy way. I mean, just be treated in a way you might not appreciate, rudely. And you have to, as Cletis did, you got to take it and let me hear your problems, even though those problems may not be communicated in a way you like. I don't know about yelling or whatever, but you have to deal with that. Is that true? You can't be the kind of person that says, how dare you get out?
Yeah, definitely. The field that we're in, I find we understand it, but most don't. And if they're not in IT, they don't necessarily have an appreciation for the complexity of it. So we're in the business because we enjoy it. And, I've always worked in healthcare IT, so kind of used to it now. And I still am very passionate about the field that we're in and the work that we do. But yeah, it just kind of comes with the territory. But kind of build, I guess, my perspective and a little bit of my story on this question. And I have to steal the coffee with Cletis. I think I'll have to do tea with Tanya.
I love it.
That's nice. Love it.
We can do chugging with Chuck too.
Chuck,
There you go. That's even better. Send me the invite. So my story here, and I think we've all kind of been through some of this with a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the industry. But so my organization has come together through mergers and acquisitions. So anytime you're kind of moving the cheese on people and changing culture and changing the way you do things, that's just an additional challenge that you're dealing with. So we have 6 hospitals here, and all of them have long, deep-rooted histories of success within the community. And now we're bringing them together and changing everything up. So, and of course, with me being the IT leader, that's where you start kind of as a foundation, is bringing the technology together, standardizing systems, bringing in a new EMR. So of course, I faced a lot of skepticism with that, both inside and outside of IT. So a couple of things that I've done on the inside of IT side. So these are people that were independently operating their own IT departments, and now I told them to play nice in the sandbox. So I do routine rounding, and I call this ACE. Actually, it's an acronym, but it's ACE IT, and it stands for tell us about your accomplishments, your challenges, and what we're doing around engaging you as an employee, and how can we make this the best place to work. So I've been doing that routinely. We kind of adjusted to more of a virtual environment now, but I do meet with every single team member at least once a quarter and have that conversation that we can celebrate accomplishments and work through any challenges together. And then of course, really taking those ideas and how we can be the best place to work and improving employee engagement. So that has been a key to getting the buy-in and support internal to IT. Outside of IT, there's a variety of things that we've done over the years, but probably the biggest thing that we do every year is engage the business in those key relationships to helping me build out the strategic plan for the next year. So what are the key objectives that they're focused on, and how do we align and invite them to the table to make sure that we're focusing on those same things and helping them be successful, and together, how can we be successful? And then agree on the listening piece. But I also think trying to find the right venue to share results. So measure, share, communicate. So we're not just this black box behind the scenes. How do we really communicate all of those results and successes that we can celebrate together? Because I've had a couple of those challenging relationships along the way too. And you kind of chip away at them, but the key to success, I think, there is co-leading and co-championing and co-presenting those successes and results. That seems to get the relationship a little bit warmer than sometimes how it starts.
Chuck?
Yep. Well, I'll tell you a story because you're talking about storytelling. I learned so much from my father. Unfortunately, it's taken me 40 years to figure out exactly what some of the things he was telling me. There are two things that my father told me that I have is my word and integrity. And no one can take either one of those away from me. I have to give them away. And if I give someone my word, that I need to make sure I keep it. And if I give away my integrity, it's something it's out of the box. You cannot get it back. So, kind of the approach that I've taken is, the two H's is honesty and humility, because if you use the other H word, which is hubris, then it's not going to come across, as well as being humble. I mean, you talked about, listening. I had two physicians that one's still a good friend of mine, other one not so much. Good doc, but I always felt like that when he started having a conversation with me, and I'll air quote conversation, is that the credits were already rolling in the movie. He'd already had this conversation in his head for 45 minutes, and he just wanted me to execute on what he was telling me. And we came to an understanding, building that relationship. And he was one of the physician leaders. But the other one that's still a friend of mine was an ER physician. He's now retired, and he loved to chew on me. And I think that he was challenging me and trying to teach me something at the same time. And so he was the one that taught me how to listen, not listen to debate, not listen to respond, but to listen to what I was being told, not only to what he was saying, but what he was not saying. There's a lot of nonverbal stuff that goes on. Tom was, I'm 6 foot tall. Tom was 5'8". And so every time I had a conversation with Tom, I sat down and he stood up, and he was always, towering over me, which that was fine, because if I stood up and he was having to talk up to me, and out of respect, I sat down. But after, one day that we had made a change in the system that impacted him and he also owned the ER physician practice. And it impacted them. So he called me down to his office in the emergency room, and he, after about 30 minutes, I think he lost his breath. He couldn't speak anymore. And I finally asked him, said, "So are you done?" And he just stopped and he looked at me and he said, "Have a seat." So then we had a conversation. And so the emotion and the energy had to be expended first, and then we could get down. And if he had made me angry, then we wouldn't have had the conversation. We would have not had the relationship that we had. So you have to get past all of that, because there was I have another story about Tom in the emergency room. If we have time, I'll tell you, because I missed a cue that I should have seen. And so, which was very important, that almost destroyed that relationship. So, but those are the people that, if you're open to conversation, and you're honest and you're humble, those people that you need to interact with will come to you. I fully believe, or they have for me anyway. So people have to know that you're approachable. When I took this position, I actually had some members of my team, knock on my door. My door was always open, and says, "Can we have a conversation?" I said, "Sure." And he sat down. He says, "I just want to make sure I'm not going to get fired for having this conversation." And I'm going, "Well, why would I fire you?" I said, "Are you going to, what are you going to say?" And he said, "No, I just want to ask some questions." I said, "I don't know of anybody that's ever been fired for asking questions." He said, "Well, where I came from, you did." So anyway, so you have to be approachable as well.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right, Tanya, we're going to start with you. Let's say you identify a key individual, you need to build a relationship. How do you begin? How do you go about it, and how do you maintain it? Now, we talked about some ways in general: coffee with Cletis, chugging with Chuck, tea with Tanya. Wonderful ideas. But let's say it's a specific one-off. Let's say you have an individual in mind, you don't know them, they're new, you're new to the organization, whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts around how you go about doing that? And we'll talk about this a little more, but you have to be authentic about it, right? And I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one answer for every situation or every person. Everyone probably has a little bit of a different style and how to approach it. So you kind of got to feel that out a little bit. But I usually start with the more formal, hey, welcome. I'd really like to pick your brain about, some of your ideas and objectives, and, just start the formal meeting and start there. And then you can kind of feel it out, but then try to move it to more of that informal conversation. You want to have lunch, et cetera, and just try to build it from there and get a feel for what kind of what they're open to. So here we are in New Orleans, so we enjoy a lot of parties.
Mhm.
So that's often a nice way to invite someone to happy hour or chug-in, I guess is what we were calling it.
Chugging with Chuck.
Yeah. So Mardi Gras is coming up here very shortly. We're very excited. We're going to have parades back and an opportunity to celebrate that time of year here. So we have a couple new executives that just joined the team over the last month. So as an executive team, we're going to have a party and really invite them in New Orleans style. So it like I said, there's really no one answer to it or one
Mhm.
approach to it, but feeling that out and not making it a one-time thing, but advancing the relationship wherever you can.
And Chuck, Tanya made a good point, which is it's got to be your style.
Yeah.
Everyone's, so we know the objective has to be to get to know people so we can accomplish work, but everyone's going to have a different style for doing that. And I think if you try and use someone else's style, it's not going to come off right.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, you know me, I'm a demo country boy from Alabama. Okay. And that's all there is to it.
That's it.
And I tell people that if you don't like the person standing in front of you, too bad. There's nobody else under my skin. So I am who I am. Now, sometimes I may say something that is stupid, which is okay because then I'll learn something. But I think that you know part of our job as leaders is not only to a lot of the things I've talked about is about dealing with the organization, and dealing is not really a good term, but working with the organization, working with leaders in order to get work done. But I think one of the key things, me being an executive and a leader, is to create relationships with the people that I need to raise up in the organization, whether they're on my team or somebody else's team. I've mentored quite a few folks, not only in my own organizations, but through formal programs and informal programs. I still have a young man that lives in Columbus that took a different career path. He interviewed for a job on my team, didn't get it because the two ladies he was going to be working for ate him alive in the interview, and he actually locked up. I mean, he couldn't talk, and so really nice guy. And so I've been mentoring him now for, I guess, 6 or 7 years, whenever he, gets into the thing. So building those relationships to elevate other people. I mean, I saw, I don't know who it was, if it was Daniel Barchi or one of the other folks, listed out the number of people that had worked for him that had elevated and become senior leaders in other organizations. I think that's a great metric about your ability to build relationships and people to trust you. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm still a dumb old country boy from Alabama, and I still talk like one too. So,
and we love you for it. I think I speak for everyone on the panel and maybe a few people in the audience. I can't speak for all of them.
Well, I'm getting texts, every chugging with Chuck hit.
So everyone wants to go.
Yeah, I had one offer to start getting the T-shirts printed. So,
Cletis, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to just kick off and jump off what Chuck was saying. One of my what I consider one of my biggest accomplishments was to see one of my leaders that used to work for me move on and become a CIO for a system, and recently became the COO and then the CEO that for a system in New York. And to me, that should be the culmination of what we are here to do, is to generate leaders, right? And even if it keeps on going, all that individual's, effort. But I like to think that's what we should be doing. Now, going back to the original question about building relationships, what I just gave you an example is, again, another internal version. Now, the external piece, when I find key individuals to really partner with, I offer to do one-on-ones with them, no different than I would do with any other, with my boss or with my staff. And that can be sometimes a little weird, right? Because you have to, I find that when you're doing one-on-ones with leaders and others, there tends to be some kind of gravity towards, well, I think I can basically get this person to kind of report to me, and your ego has to change, right? Going back, it all goes back to that ego, right? You have to let it go, right? You have to be able to say, when you're doing this kind of one-on-ones, and so that you can have, whether it's quarterly, every couple of months or whatever it is. Monthly is probably a little bit too much, but it creates a level of information sharing with the colleagues that you've identified, and it helps move and remove some of the confusion that may occur between divisions. Is that's sometimes you see that. So I make sure my main concern is always connecting with the CFO, right? As an IT, knowing that we're across, we cross draining, expense department, and I remain aligned with supply chain, finance, and CFO, but other areas as well, such as other areas of virtual health or some other service lines that we have, oncology and others. I create these connections that we consistently will communicate with each other, and making sure we remain aligned. So again, you would have to navigate a little differently, right? For each one, some good, some not so, and you just got to deal with it. But again, if you haven't heard the common theme, it's about ego management, and it's usually managing your own ego is part of this construct.
So Cletis, just to be clear, you said you like these one-on-one, requesting these one-on-one meetings, and you said that some people may not like to do this because in a way you're submitting to that other person. You're humbling yourself. You're saying, can I meet with you? And you can't have an ego there, otherwise you won't do that. And you should do these because they're effective, correct?
Correct.
All right. Very
Absolutely.
good. Excellent. Okay. I think this is really important. So I want to talk about this. And Tanya, I want to start with you on this. We all want our work relationships to fit into a certain level of familiarity. No more and no less, like the Goldilocks thing, right? How do we avoid transgressing someone's comfort zone? And how do you keep from your comfort zone being transgressed? So there's a lot going on here, right? So we want to build relationships. We talk about requesting meetings. We talk about parties. We talk about Mardi Gras. We talk about different things. Some things we're talking about are not during work hours. We're doing these to build a relationship. We may have good intentions. You could have an individual that says, I go home and I'm with my family, so I'm not going to your party. I'd love to work with you, but I'm not going to your party. So I've talked, we hear a lot of executives say, they speak as if there's almost no limit to the degree these relationships should go into the personal realm, right? Everyone should be best friends. To me, I'm not sure about that. And I'm not sure, certain individuals may have some boundaries. So the question is, as you go about wanting to establish relationships, how do you make sure you're respectful and you're not sort of in your mind requiring someone to do certain things they're just not feel like getting that familiar? So Tanya, what are your thoughts?
Yes, it's a tough one. Again, I don't think it's a single answer. You really got to navigate everyone individually. But I guess I'll kind of tell a similar story to what Chuck said around making sure it's not the physician necessarily that you need to keep happy, but really understanding their nurse is who's going to help them be happy. So early on in my career, probably some of the best advice I've ever gotten from one of my mentors was to become best friends with the executive assistants, particularly for those relationships that you're trying to build, because oftentimes those folks are their best friends, and manage the calendars of those folks. So great advice. So that's something that I've always tried to really hone in on, is understanding that relationship and who's managing the calendar, and start to get to know them, who will all, once you have a relationship with those folks, they'll probably help you understand the specific style or approaches with whoever that is you're trying to build a relationship with.
Cletis, any thoughts?
I don't really have much more to add regarding, again, I think Tanya covered it well. We just need to continue to look at what the customer wants, right? And, you don't need to be friends with everybody. You don't need to know everybody's, it would be good to know people's family's name and get to know and connect with each other outside of that. But knowing that not everybody is, we know we have different types of personality types. Not everybody likes going to parties. Not everybody likes doing one-on-ones. You have to get to know your customer, and the customer being that executive or whoever you're trying to make sure you're aligned with, and manage accordingly, right? I know I'm sounding somewhat ambiguous, but everybody's unique to what Tanya said, right? Everybody's different. Some people like to party, and they you can meet them at the bar and do some chucking with Chug, chugging with Chuck. You could do that, or you just kind of a brief conversation. This question is very interesting because there's so many different personalities. It's very difficult to figure it out and have a overarching answer. So everything is unique.
Chuck, can you be an effective leader if you're not interested in being friends with everybody and going out and hanging out? Can you still be an effective leader if maybe you have tighter boundaries?
I guess I'm an example of that. I believe that you need to be friendly. I also believe that it can be misconstrued. That on my team, I've got about 150 people that report up through my organization. There, I've got some key people that I strategize with, that I work with, and one or two of them that I've gone and played golf with. I wouldn't classify myself as friends, but everybody else watches, and so you have to be careful about having and I'm going to use the word teacher's pet, because it puts them at risk as well. And so the other thing too is I was going to say is relationships change. I had the pleasure of working with originally a young man who was the internal auditor. He and I did a turnaround in patient accounting and totally changed the landscape. It was a quality improvement initiative between the internal auditor and IT and others to drive days in AR down, which we did. That young man today is the president of that organization. He moved up to a vice president, to the CFO, to the CEO. Our relationship, even though we're still friends, it changed over the course of time because I reported to him for 18 years. He taught me how to play golf. He won't admit it because I don't play that well, but so you have to be willing to let those relationships modify over time. But I never had dinner at his house. He never had dinner at mine. We went to the golf course every once in a while. We played racquetball. After I had my heart attack, we played racquetball almost every day at lunch. But that was his routine that he asked me to come and play because he knew I needed to rehab. So I think you have to be a good enough judge of human character to know when somebody, at what level people want to engage. And the other thing is, we were talking, kidding around before we got online is, some people, you also need to understand that some people may be intimidated by your position or your supposedly stature in the industry, and won't engage with you until they realize that you put your pants on just like everybody else does, one leg at a time. And that you need to be, once again, approachable. So I think we need to be aware of that as we work with our relationships.
All right, very good. My favorite section here. I want to see what the panel comes up with. Chuck, I'm going to go to you first. You have a question for one or both of your co-panelists.
Well, I just want to know what Tanya's going to do for Mardi Gras. No, I'm just kidding. I've got some good friends that I work with in Columbus that always kept their house in New Orleans, so I'm jealous. I love New Orleans, but I guess the question I would have is, because Tanya's in New Orleans, Cletis is in Pennsylvania, I'm in Indiana, and so I would bet you a nickel to a donut that the challenges we have with relationships are the same, regardless of region. We've all, sat in the CIO seat and at different size organizations. I've had the pleasure of being now in 3 organizations that are of varying size. And so I guess the question, I know Tanya, you came from Michigan, and Cletis, I know where you came from, which is in the New England area. Have you noticed that the need for relationships has changed as you've changed organizations, or has it stayed pretty constant? And the other add-on to that question, I feel like I'm now in the press corps asking questions, is
That's right.
Has what you learned in your previous organization helped you in the one you're in now?
Cletus, let's go to you first.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, it's very interesting. So Chuck, yeah, coming from New York, going to Western New York, and then, in essence, down to PA, there is definitely a regional element that I've seen associated to how one needs to navigate. The attitude from New York City is definitively, although it could be somewhat rude.
Hey, watch it. Watch it. I'm in northern New Jersey. You better watch it.
I'm a New Yorker through and through, Tony. But the thing is, no, my point is, it's rougher, right? It's the New York state of mind. But as I moved to Western New York, it became Western New York nice. Now it's PA nice, right? Central PA nice. And I say the whole concept of nice, I realize that personalities, and people you talk to and how you manage people has changed. As you go into different regions, they don't want that, if you give feedback to people in certain regions, they take it as if you're almost cursing at them, right? And you have to be very mindful of your approach because of the sensitivity that everything is not equal there. So I've navigated differently because of the regionality component associated, and knowing that all things are not equal, because there's if you critique somebody in central Pennsylvania of work, they're taking it as with pride, and they don't see, you're, wait a minute, you're attacking me, you're attacking my. So I had to change my approach significantly, although I knew some of that at Western New York. So it's a very interesting dynamic, Chuck, as you asked that question. But yeah, I do think there's different navigation approaches, regional.
Tanya?
Yeah, so I was from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I went from Wisconsin to New Orleans. So fortunately, culture-wise, there's a lot of similarities, believe it or not. We're all about our football teams. We're all about our food. And I guess beer is pretty common too between Wisconsin and New Orleans. And personality-wise, very, very similar too, in terms of we're very nice, in fact, one of my early experiences when I got here was LSU played the Badgers in Green Bay at Lambeau. So I had a whole swarm of folks from New Orleans going up to Green Bay for this party. And it was just the merging and gelling of 2 very wonderful personalities. So I've been really fortunate to feel like I haven't had to navigate various different styles. I have spent some time on the East Coast though, and I agree with what Cletis is saying around just different personalities in the different regions. But what probably from a work experience standpoint, my prior organizations were further along in the whole integrated delivery network journey. They had been long-standing organizations, so really had a maturity about that and how decisions were made and how we operate as an organization. So here it was basically starting from scratch, pulling these organizations together and starting a culture. So I had to learn to be patient with some of that, and that, this is how this always was in my past, and it was pretty simple, and it's how things were. So now I had to kind of take a step back and wait and be a little bit more patient and not be too aggressive about why aren't we doing this already, kind of things. But that would be the differences in my experience.
Very good. Cletis, do you have a question for one or both of your co-panelists?
Yeah. Again, I'm piggybacking on Chuck's point. How have you then navigated over the last 2 years, as COVID has, in my opinion, been transformational of how we, work, but not only just working, but communicating and establishing those relationships? How have you navigated differently, knowing where we are with COVID?
Chuck?
Well, it's a great question, Cletis. The question is for me is, have I been successful? Because I spend a lot of time doing this, and I'm one of the guys that in teams you have all these circles. I'm the guy on camera, and make sure that the light coming in the window doesn't bounce too much off my head and blind everybody. Yeah, and so I think we have to be more forthright with those communications. My team knows that I'm not the boss. I'm the one that's responsible, but it takes all of us to get there. And so I have to be more, forthright to, reach out to do that communications. And fortunately, we've got, the variety of communication platforms for us to use. And unfortunately, many times I'm on a headset with a Teams call, and then I've got somebody texting me on my phone, somebody calling me on my phone, and then my office phone rings here on my computer, on my soft phone as well. Then I've got somebody chatting me over here. So it's a good thing and it's an evil thing at the same time. But I think that, you can be as present virtually as you are in your office. And the thing I miss about not being in the office as often as we used to be is I had a lot of people that just drove by, kind of the walk by. A couple of guys on my team are woodworkers like me. I've got, one of the gentlemen is an Eagle Scout. I'm not an Eagle Scout, but I love to hear about how he's working with the young people for that. So he'd come by and tell me about, some of the things they're working on. So it's when you build those relationships, people are going to come by and have those personal or somewhat personal conversations with you. So but we're doing it, but not as often, and so I think you have to be more, it has to be top of mind that I need to connect.
Yeah, intentional.
Intentional. That's my word. Like I said, I'm just a dumb old country boy from Alabama, so I learned a new one today. So.
All right, listen, Tanya, I'm not going to have time for you to answer that question, but what I want to do is, we're almost out of time. I want to give everyone a chance for a final comment. And here's what I want you to be thinking about. We've all talked about doing a lot of things, about going around and meeting with people and having open doors and all that. We all know that time is the only absolute constraint we have. You can't make more of it. And we're all busy people, probably you three a little more than me, but that's the way it is. So my question is, how are you structuring your time? How do you know how much time to devote to this as opposed to other things? There are many people, I'm sure there are some people, CIOs, who would say, I don't have time for this. I can't do any of this stuff. I just don't have any time. But obviously it's important to find time. So any advice you can give there to your colleagues on making time for this, how to make time for this, how to do it perhaps efficiently, and that type of thing. So Tanya, let's start with you.
Sure. I guess I'll go back to some comments said earlier around leadership development and empowering those around you and that you can mentor. So I'd like to think that's something I do well in terms of I'm not a micromanager. I make time for my reports, but they know exactly what the direction is And then they appreciate and enjoy that they're not micromanaged. They're very empowered to do their jobs, which then frees up my time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not necessarily in meetings all day, on weedy issues, et cetera. I really trust them and they do a great job. And so it really does free up my time to do the things that I like to do, build the relationships that need some time, and get involved with other learning. So
That's a great point. That's a great point, is that if you are, I think, completely harried and have no time, look at some of the things you're involved in and see if you really need to be in there and perhaps extract yourself. Right, Tanya?
Yep.
Very good. All right, Cletis?
And the time piece, I'm going to be very honest, I'm not very good at that. I come from a different era where, I would maximize and I'll continue to work. And I realize I don't really take advantage of the work-life balance. I have since understood, over the last few years, that my expectations are different than others. And people are watching me, right? My leaders are watching me and they're emulating that. So I'm doing a really pointed effort to try to change that approach of using things like Viva, Microsoft to give me focus time, and being able to do that and not take as much meetings, right?
Mhm.
And distribute it as much. So I think I'm learning and I'm just being very transparent that this is a new era of work-life balance that I didn't grow up on. So I'm trying to figure it out, and then trying to make sure that I meet our teams where they are in this new environment.
So you have a tendency to have no balance and just work 10 hours a day, and it's easy with the technologies, right? You'd never be off.
At home, on the weekends, on vacations, and now I'm being intentional, back to that,
Right.
to unplug in order to do that, because people are watching, and I need to make sure that I realize I'm pressuring them by doing that. So this is a learning lesson for me.
Very great point. Excellent point. Chuck, we're going to give you the last word.
Thanks. So I'll give you a couple of things. Don't ask that question to my wife, because she tells me now that I don't work at home. I live at work. And so I'll give you another one of my dad's stories. My dad was a sheet metal journeyman and a welder. He worked for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company for 43 years. And so I always wondered, when I got out of high school, I asked my dad to get me on at Goodyear. I won't give you his exact words, but he said no. And he used some other colorful language beforehand. He said, if you want to screw up your life, you go get it yourself. I raised you to use your mind, not your back. And so I did. I went to college, went into medical field in radiology. And I always wondered who the smarter person was, because now I got into management. I lost my mind and got into IT and informatics, and got to thinking about it. When my dad was at work, he was at work. When my dad wasn't at work, he wasn't at work. But I'm always at work. I mean, just like the other folks on the panel today, is we're always thinking about work, whether we think we're thinking about it or not. And so I have a wood shop. I build things for my wife. I'm learning how to, I used to paint and do art. I'm picking that back up. I laid it down for 30 years, so I'm picking it back up again and learning some tools and techniques. So I think you have to be, as Cletis said, intentional with your time. So.
Well, that was tremendous. We're out of time. Regarding continuing education, you could use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording is ready. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team, and you can go to our website to register for upcoming panels. I want to thank our panel. This was tremendous conversation. Chuck Christian, Cletis Earle, Tanya Townsend, and I want to thank you, our attendees. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.